Yo, as the European Championship approaches and links to the Manchester United job begins to strengthen, I wanted to make a video about England manager Gareth Southgate, specifically about his philosophy and tactical approach, his glaringly obvious weakness, how I think he will set up his England side in this summer's tournament, and his suitability for the Manchester United job. Gareth Southgate's philosophy involves possession-based football with lots of rotations between the attacking players in the final third. He has become well known for his mid to low block and his use of a double pivot in midfield, or at least the option to switch to one mid-game, both of which are prevalent approaches in international football, especially at major tournaments. Southgate likes his teams to press initially with the wide players key in trying to force the opposition to play through the middle, where England should have the numbers and physicality to quash the opposition in this phase. However, as the opposition advance with the ball, they adopt a mid-block in the next phase of play, and the priority switches towards forcing the opposition wide. You will rarely see international sides press like Manchester City, Liverpool, Atalanta or Feyenoord, which I will speak a bit more about later in this video when I discuss the differences between club football and international football. In terms of formations, he is shown to be quite flexible. When he was the Middlesbrough manager, when he was the manager of the England under-21 side, he liked to switch between a 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1. And as manager of the senior team, he has played both of these formations, in addition to a 3-5-2 and a 3-4-3. I want to speak about England's 2-1 defeat by the then World Cup holders France in Qatar. I have chosen this game for two reasons. One, it was their last game in a major tournament. And two, I think this game encapsulates almost every point that I want to make about Southgate as a manager. So, did Southgate get his tactics spot on in this game, or was he too cautious? In my opinion, a bit of both. Southgate opted for what looked like the same 4-3-3 formation that he played against Senegal in the previous round. But in this game, it functioned more like a 3-4-3 with asymmetric fullbacks. Kyle Walker remained as part of the back three to combat the threat of Kylian Mbappe. Luke Shaw pushed up on the opposite side, and Jordan Henderson played more on the right-hand side. This more cautious approach did cause England a few major problems. England had to build up in a more restrictive 3-2 structure as opposed to the 2-3 structure that they usually build up from in a 4-3-3. It is much easier to progress the ball in a 2-3 structure with both fullbacks pushing up and the two box-to-box midfield players providing passing options in more advanced positions, particularly in those half spaces. Nowadays, most teams play out from the back, which is one of the reasons that inverted fullbacks have become commonplace. Having one of the fullbacks step into midfield means that the teams can push another midfielder into a more advanced position to provide more passing options between the lines, making it easier to progress the ball through the middle of the pitch. This, in combination with international sides favouring mid to low blocks out of possession, can make progressing the ball quite difficult at major tournaments. When England build up in this rigid 3-2 structure, it makes it more difficult to progress the ball, which is why we see so many sideways passes between the central defenders and the deeper midfield players, thus the labelling of Southgate's teams as boring or safe. With Kyle Walker remaining as part of the back three and Jordan Henderson playing almost like a wing back on the right hand side at times, England struggled to progress the ball in this game against Didier Deschamps' incredibly compact midfield. That being said, England dominated possession, they managed defensive transitions well, and they limited France to very few chances. They had double the shots that France had, they had 3 more shots on target, and they had a missed spot kick from Harry Kane. You could argue that individual errors, yet again, cost England more so than the overly cautious approach of the manager. Personally, I thought Southgate, at least tactically, got it spot on. It's impossible to know how this game would have gone if Kyle Walker had played more as a conventional fullback, Henderson played more centrally, and England simply played their game. But if that went wrong, questions would have been asked about Southgate not having a plan to contain the threat of arguably the best player in the world in Kylian Mbappe. These games are often analysed based on the result and not necessarily the tactical approach of the manager. In knockout tournaments, you can get your approach right and still lose. If knockout tournaments were that straightforward, then Pep Guardiola would have a lot more than 3 Champions Leagues. I think Southgate's main flaw as a manager is his inability to influence games of football after they've started. Tactically, he's proven himself to be quite adept, at least prior to kickoff, but in terms of responding to changes made by the opposition's manager, he leaves a lot to be desired. For example, around 2 months ago, England played a friendly against Brazil at Wembley. Southgate played a 4-2-3-1 formation with Declan Rice and Conor Gallagher in the double pivot and Jude Bellingham playing as the 10. England were front-footed, they pressed aggressively, they played a higher line than usual and edged Brazil in both shots and possession. They were probably on top of this game for an hour or so before the Brazil coach Dorival Jr. tweaked his midfield, switching from Bruno Guimaraes as the lone 6 to a double pivot of Guimaraes and João Gomes. This forced England to press slightly higher, resulting in Declan Rice having to pass on Rodrigo to the central defenders. Then Brazil played more direct to the pacey pair of Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr., who caused England all sorts of problems. Southgate made 5 personnel changes, but there was no discernible difference to their approach. He did not adapt, or he didn't feel the need to adapt to the tactical switches made by Brazil. In this game, England certainly looked a lot easier on the eye, and there was a lot more optimism about this performance, but England gave up 7 big chances and only created 1 themselves despite dominating the game for large periods. Brazil managed to adjust to England, but England did not adjust to Brazil. I will concede that Kyle Walker going off after 20 minutes was a huge loss given his strength at defending and fast breaks, but my point stands. Southgate's in-game management and destabilising substitutions is a problem regardless of how well he initially sets his teams up. So how will England line up at the Euros? I think we'll glean a bit more information about this in the upcoming friendlies with Bosnia and Iceland, but I think it's highly likely that we see a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, with him potentially switching to a 3-4-3 against tougher opponents. In the last European Championships, Southgate played a back 4 in 5 of the 7 games, only switching to a back 3 against Germany and for the final against Italy. It's worth mentioning as well that another benefit to this 3-4-3 is that it can become a box midfield, which would suit attacking midfielders that often start wide like Phil Foden, Cole Palmer or James Maddison. The 3-4-3 is probably the only formation that I can see Trent Alexander-Arnold started in on the right hand side of a midfield 4. He would have one of the double pivots and the recovery pace of Kyle Walker on his side to protect him as he rampages forward and influences the game with that quality that we know he has. Southgate likes his fullbacks to play conventionally and to deliver crosses into the box when they can, as opposed to inverting into midfield. So for me, this is the only way that Trent gets into the starting 11 for an important game. I've mentioned Southgate's preference for a double pivot in midfield, so who will be Declan Rice's partner in this too? Who's the Calvin Phillips or Jordan Henderson replacement? Jude Bellingham can play in this position, which would allow Phil Foden to play as a 10, with Kobbie Mainoo and Conor Gallagher as the other likely options. That would then result in Bellingham playing as a 10 and Foden starting from the left-hand side. Bellingham, like Mason Mount did under Southgate, could play beside Rice in the double pivot when England needs to be more aggressive. I've seen a lot of people suggest that because there's arguably no fit for that position beside Declan Rice in midfield, that Southgate should opt for a 4-3-3. That will mean that you're playing with 2 8s in midfield who will need to be tactically excellent and good at both defending and attacking in transition. Given that Southgate likes his fullbacks to get forward, as the wingers play more like inside forwards, occasionally switching places with the number 10, these number 8s will need to play a key role in protecting the space behind the attacking fullback on their side. It's really easy to suggest that both Phil Foden and Jude Bellingham should play in these box-to-box positions either side of Rice, and it looks great on paper, but I'm not convinced that this would function well as a unit. So can Foden and Bellingham both play in the same team? Absolutely. I think we will see Kobbie Mainoo or Conor Gallagher beside Declan Rice and Bellingham in the 10 position. This can easily become a 4-3-3 with Bellingham dropping further back to play as an 8 on one side and either Gallagher or Mainoo switching to play as an 8 on the opposite side. That would mean Phil Foden would start from the left but playing a little bit more inside. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that Southgate likes lots of rotations in the final third, so we will see a lot of interchanging of positions between Bellingham, Foden and Bukayo Saka. Bellingham playing as a 10 also means England can press with 2 players from the front in Kane and Bellingham. And when Kane drops deep, as he often does, Bellingham can then drive forward and take up that centre forward position to ensure that they always have a focal point in attack, especially one that possesses a real goal threat. As for who plays in the back 4, the only real dilemma is who plays at left back if Luke Shaw isn't fit. For Foden to play more inside on the left, the width on that side needs to come from the fullback, and I think Kieran Trippier probably makes the most sense in terms of understanding the position and his experience. I would expect Southgate to persist with both Harry Maguire and John Stones, given their experience, excellent defensive record in major tournaments, their ball carrying capabilities and their ability to pass between the lines. Kyle Walker I think is a shoe-in at right back, and we might even see him in a back 3 at times this summer. Jordan Pickford, as ever, off the back of a brilliant season, will continue to play in goal. Another reason that this back 3 works well is you actually get the best version of Kyle Walker, using that recovery pace of his to almost play as a sweeper beside John Stones and Harry Maguire. Southgate can still play with his preferred double pivot in midfield with 2 fullbacks that can get forward and cross and 2 wingers playing as inside forwards. Essentially, you're sacrificing a number 10 for additional central defender. I don't think we'll see a 3-5-2 from the start with this squad of players, but rather a 3-4-3. Make no mistake, this England side are tournament favourites for a reason. They are one of the best international sides out there. Our perception of this England side is biased by what we know to be dominant club sides. Of course, you can cite results that England have had in the past against quote-unquote weaker opposition, but the results of international football can be all over the place. Scotland beat Spain in the qualifiers, France drew with Greece and squeezed past an abysmal Ireland side, and tournament host Germany lost 4-1 to Japan in September. Not to mention, before Argentina won the World Cup, the same criticism was levelled at them regarding their style of play and their inability to get over the line in big occasions. Also, international managers are not afforded the luxury of working with their players every day to prepare for every eventuality and to drill patterns of play. Club managers can sign players to plug specific gaps in their team and sign players that suit their preferred way of playing. So taking all this into account, does Southgate deserve to be in the running for arguably the biggest job in world football, the Manchester United job? I don't think so. I think he's a good man manager, which shouldn't be overlooked, and he is tactically more astute than he is generally perceived to be, but his inability to influence games of football once they've started is really worrying. Although he got relegated from the Premier League with Middlesbrough as a manager, he didn't even have his UEFA Pro licence when he took charge, and he was harshly sacked in the eyes of many the following season after a promising start in the Championship. But I do think if he returns to manage at club level, I think it will be a mid-table Premier League club at best. That's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. This video was focused on Southgate's tactics as opposed to his man management skills, and without taking various psychological elements into account, such as the mentality of this England side or the pressure that has been placed on them to perform. If you liked the video or if you learned anything new, then please do click the like button. It helps a lot. Also, please consider subscribing for more football related content just like this one. Lastly, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of Gareth Southgate as a manager? How do you think England will do in the Euros this summer? And Manchester United fans, would you like Gareth Southgate to replace Eric Ten Hag? Thanks for watching.